All right. Okay. We will actually wait a couple more minutes and then we'll start. Well, according to the weather report, I only have another 7 days of 100 degrees or more. And then it will go down into a very cool upper 90s for about 7 days. So I have to tell you, it's beginning to wear on me.
And just imagine if you're not able to sleep properly or anything. Nah, you know.
It's actually just kind of not being able to do much physically. It's just too difficult. So I get a little sluggish. But anyway, enough of my complaining. Minor complaints altogether. All right, I think we're ready to go. So let me say to the YouTube folks or the Facebook folks that we're beginning the Wandering Rocks section today from the beginning. So if you want to read along, you just go to wherever Wandering Rocks is in your edition. And off we go. Superior, the very Reverend John Comney, S.J., reset his smooth watch in his interior pocket as he came down the presbytery steps. 5 to 3. Just nice time to walk to Artane. What was that boy's name again? Digham, yes. Okay. Vere Digham injustum est. Brother Swan was the person to see. Mr. Cunningham's letter, yes. Oblige him if possible. Good practical Catholic. Useful at mission time. A one-legged sailor, swinging himself onward by lazy jerks of his crutches, growled some notes. He jerked short before the convent of the Sisters of Charity and held out his peaked cap for alms towards the very Reverend John Comney, S.J. Father Comney blessed him in the sun, for his purse held, he knew, 1 silver crown. Father Comney crossed to Mount Joyce Square. He thought, but not for long, of soldiers and sailors whose legs had been shot off by cannonballs, ending their days in some pauper ward, or of Cardinal Wolsey's words, "If I had served my God as I served my king, he would not have abandoned me in my old days." He walked by the tree shade of sun-winking leaves, and towards him came the wife of Mr. David Sheeny, MP. Next, please.
Very well indeed, Father. And you, Father? Father Conmay was wonderfully well indeed. He would go to Buxton, probably for the waters. And her boys, were they getting on well at Belvedere? Was that so? Father Conmay was very glad indeed to hear that. And Mr. She himself? Still in London. The house was still sitting, to be sure it was. Beautiful weather it was, delightful indeed. Yes, it was very probable that Father Bernard Vaughan would come again to preach. Oh, yes, a very great success. A wonderful man, really. Father Conmay was very glad to see the wife of Mr. David Sheehy, MP, looking so well, and he begged to be remembered to Mr. David Sheehy, MP. Yes, he would certainly call. Good afternoon, Miss Sheehy. Father Conmay doffed his silk hat, and as he took leave, at the jet beads of her mantilla shining in the sun, and smiled yet again in going. He had cleaned his teeth, he knew, with arecanut paste. Father Conmay walked, and walking smiled, for he thought on Father Bernard Vaughan's droll eyes and cockney voice. Pilot, why don't you back that owling mob? Next, please.
A zealous man, however, really he was, and really did good in his way, beyond a doubt. He loved Ireland, he said, And he loved the Irish. Of good family too, one would think it. Welsh, were they not? Oh, lest he forget, the letter to Father Provincial. Father Conmee stopped 3 little schoolboys at the corner of Mountjoy Square. Yes, they were from Belvedere, the little house. Aha. And were they good boys at school? Oh, that was very good now. And what was his name? Jack Sohan. And his name? Ger Gallagher. And the other little man? His name was Brunny Lynham. Oh, that was a very nice name to have. Father Conmee gave a letter from his breast to Master Brunny Lynham and pointed to the red pillar box at the corner of Fitzgibbon Street. But mind you don't post yourself into the box, little man, he said. The boys six-eyed Father Conmee and laughed. Oh, sir. Well, let me see if you can post a letter, Father Conmee said. Master Brunny Lynham ran across the road and put Father Conmee's letter to Father Provincial into the mouth of the bright red letterbox. Father Conmee smiled and nodded and smiled and walked along Mountjoy Square East. Mr. Dennis J. McGinney, professor of dancing, etc., in silk hat, slate frock coat with silk facings, white kerchief tie, tight lavender trousers, canary gloves, and pointed patent boots, walking with grave deportment, most respectfully, took the curbstone as he passed Lady Maxwell at the corner of Digham's Court. Was that not Mrs. McGuinness? Mrs. McGuinness, stately, silver-haired, bowed to Father Conmee from the farther footpath, along which she smiled. And Father Conmee smiled and saluted. How did she do? A fine carriage she had, like Mary Queen of Scots something. And to think he was a pawnbroker. Well now, what should he say? Such a queenly mien. Next, please.
Father Conmee walked down Great Charles Street and glanced at the shut-up Free Church on his left. The Reverend T.R. Green, B.A., will, D.B., speak. The incumbent, they called him. He felt it incumbent on him to say a few words, but one should be charitable, invincible ignorance. They acted according to their lights. Father Conmee turned the corner and walked along the North Circular Road. It was a wonder that there was not a tram line in such an important thoroughfare. Surely there ought to be. A band of satcheled schoolboys crossed from Richmond Street. All raised untidy caps. Father Conmee greeted them more than once benignly. Christian brother boys. Father Conmee smelled incense on his right hand as he walked. St. Joseph Church, Portland Row, for aged and virtuous females. Father Conmee raised his hat to the Blessed Sacrament. Virtuous, but occasionally they were also bad-tempered. Near Aldborough House, Father Conmee thought of that spendthrift nobleman, and now it was an office or something. Father Conmee began to walk along the North Strand Road and was saluted by William Gallagher, who stood in the doorway of his shop. Father Conmee saluted Mr. William Gallagher and perceived the odors that came from bacon flitches and ample cools of butter. He passed Grogan's, the tobacconist, against which newsboards leaned and told of a dreadful catastrophe in New York. In America, those things were continually happening. Unfortunate people to die like that unprepared. Still, an act of perfect contrition. Father Conmee went by Daniel Bergen's public house, against the window of which 2 unlaboring men lounged. They saluted him and were saluted. Father Conmee passed H.J. O'Neill's funeral establishment, where Corny Kelleher totted figures in the daybook while he chewed a blade of hay. A constable on his beat saluted Father Conmee, and Father Conmee saluted the constable. In Euchstetter's, the pork butcher's, Father Conmee observed pigs' puddings, white and black and red, lying neatly curled in tubes. Moored under the trees of Charleville Mall, Father Conmee saw a turf barge, a tow horse with pendant head, a bargeman with a hat of dirty straw seated amidships, smoking and staring at a branch of poplar above him. It was idyllic, and Father Conmee reflected on the providence of the Creator, who had made turf to be in bogs where men might dig it out and bring it to town and hamlet to make fires in the houses of poor people. Next, please.
Lois?
On Newcomen Bridge. Oh, is it me?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it's you, Orla.
At Newcomen Bridge, Father Conmee stepped into an outward bound tram, for he disliked to traverse on foot the dingy way past Mud Island. Father Conmee sat in a corner of the tram car, a blue ticket tucked with care in the eye of one plump kid glove, while 4 shillings, a sixpence, and 5 pennies shooted from his other plump glove palm into his purse. Passing the Ivy Church, he reflected that the ticket inspector usually made his visit when one had carelessly thrown away the ticket. The solemnity of the occupants of the car seemed to Father Conmee excessive for a journey so short and cheap. Father Conmee liked cheerful decorum. It was a peaceful day. The gentleman with the glass opposite Father Conmee had finished explaining and looked down. His wife, Father Conmee supposed. A tiny yawn opened the mouth of the wife of the gentleman with the glasses. She raised her small gloved fist, yawned ever so gently, tip-tapping her small gloved fist on her opening mouth, and smiled tinnily, sweetly. Next, please.
Father Conmee perceived her perfume in the car. He perceived also that the awkward man at the other side of her was sitting on the edge of the seat. Father Conmee at the altar rails placed the host with difficulty in the mouth of an awkward old man who had the shaky head. At Annesley Bridge, the tram halted, and when it was about to go, an old woman rose suddenly from her place to alight. The conductor pulled the bell strap to stay the car for her. She passed out with her basket and a market net, and Father Conmee saw the conductor help her and net and basket down. And Father Conmee thought that, as she had nearly passed to the end of the penny fare, she was one of those good souls who had always to be told twice, "Bless you, my child," that they have been absolved. Pray for me. But they had so many worries in life, so many cares, poor creatures. From the hoardings, Mr. Eugene Stratton grimaced with thick lips at Father Conmee. Father Conmee thought of the souls of black and brown and yellow men, and of his sermon on St. Peter Claver, S.J., and the African mission and the propagation of the faith, and of the millions of black and brown and yellow souls that had not received the baptism of water when their last hour came like a thief in the night. That book by the Belgian Jesuit, Renaud Desleux, seemed to Father Conmee a reasonable plea. Those were millions of human souls created by God in his own likeness, to whom the faith had not TV been brought, but they were God's souls, created by God. It seemed to Father Conmee a pity that they should all be lost, a waste, if one might say. Next.
At the Howth Road stop, Father Conmee alighted, was saluted by the conductor, and saluted in his turn. The Malahide Road was quiet. It pleased Father Conmee, road and name. The joy bells were ringing in gay Malahide. Lord Talbot de Malahide, immediate hereditary Lord Admiral of Malahide and the seas adjoining. Then came the call to arms, and she was made wife and widow in one day. Those were old worldish days, loyal times in joyous townlands, old times in the barony. Father Conmee, walking, thought of his little book, The Old Times in the Barony, and of the book that might be written about Jesuit houses, and of Mary Rochford, daughter of Lord Molesworth, first Countess of Belvedere. A listless lady, no more young, walked alone the shore of Loth. Mary, first Countess of Belvedere, listlessly walking in the evening, not startled when an otter plunged. Who could know the truth? Not the jealous Lord Belvedere, and not her confessor, if she had not committed adultery folly, ejaculatio seminis inter vas naturale mulieris, with her husband's brother. She would have confessed if she had not all sinned as women did. Only God knew, and she and he, her husband's brother. Next, please.
Father Comney thought of that tyrannous incontinence, needed, however, for men's race on earth, and of the ways of gods which was not our ways. Don John Comney walked and moved in times of yore. He was humane and honored there. He bore in mind secrets confessed, and he smiled at smiling noble faces in the bee-waxed drawing room, sealing with full fruit clusters. And the hands of a bride and of a bridegroom, noble to noble, were empalmed by Don John Comney. It was a charming day. The lich gate of a field showed Father Comney breasts of cabbages, curtsying to him with ample underleaves. The sky showed him a flock of small white clouds going slowly down the wind. Montonnerre, the French say, a homely and just word. Father Comney, reading his office, watched a flock of muttoning clouds over Rathcoff. His thin-socked ankles were tickled by the stubble of Clongo's field. He walked there, reading in the evening, and heard the cries of the boys' lines at their play, young cries in the quiet evening. He was their rector. His reign was mild. Father Comney drew off his gloves and took his red-edged breviary out. An ivory bookmark told him the page. Nuns. He should have read that before lunch. But Lady Maxwell had come. Father Comney read in secret, Pater in Ave, and crossed his breast, Deus in adiutorium. Next, please.
He walked calmly and read mutely the Nunes, walking and reading till he came to res in beati immaculati, principium verborum tuorum veritas, in aeternum omnia judicia justitia tu. A flushed young man came from a gap of a hedge, and after him came a young woman with wild nodding daisies in her hand. The young man raised his cap abruptly. The young woman abruptly bent and with slow care detached from her light skirt a clinging twig. Father Conmee blessed both gravely and turned a thin page of his breviary. Sin principes persecuti sunt me gratis, ea verbis tuis formidavit cor meum. Corny Keller closed his long day book and glanced with his drooping eye at a pine coffin lid sentried in a corner. He pulled himself erect, went to it, and spinning on its axle, viewed its shape and brass furnishings. Chewing his blade of hay, he laid it on the coffin lid by and came to the doorway. There he tilted his hat brim to give shade to his eyes and leaned against the door case, looking idly out. Father John Conmee stepped into the Dollymount tram on Newcomen Bridge. Corny Keller locked his large-footed boots and gazed, his hat down tilted, chewing his blade of hay. Constable 57C on his beat stood to pass the time of day. That's a fine day, Mr. Keller. Aye, Corny Keller said. It's very close, the constable said. Corny Keller sped a silent jet of hay juice arching from his mouth, while a generous white arm from a window in Eccles Street flung forth a coin. What's the best news? He asked. I've seen that particular party last evening, the constable said with bated breath. Next, please.
One-legged sailor clutched himself round McConnell's corner, skirting Rambiotti's ice cream car, and jerked himself up Eccles Street towards Larry O'Rourke in shirt sleeves in his doorway. He growled unamiably for England. He swung himself violently forward past Katie and Booty Dedalus, halted and growled, home and beauty. J.J. O'Malloy's white, careworn face was told that Mr. Lambert was in the warehouse with a visitor. A stout lady stopped, took a copper coin from her purse, and dropped it into the cap held out to her. Sailor grumbled thanks and glanced sourly at the unheating windows, sank his head and swung himself forward 4 strides. He halted and growled angrily, for England. 2 barefoot urchins, sucking long licorice laces, halted near him, gaping at his stump with their yellow slobbered mouths. He swung himself forward in vigorous jerks, halted, lifted his head toward a window and bayed deeply, home and beauty. The gay, sweet, chirping whistle within went on a bar or two, ceased. The blind of the window was drawn aside. A card, unfurnished apartments, slipped from the sash and fell. A plump, bare, generous arm shone, was seen, held forth from a white petticoat bodice and taut shift straps. A woman's hand flung forth a coin over the area railings. It fell on the path. One of the urchins ran to it, picked it up, and dropped it into the minstrel's cap, saying, "There, sir." Next, please.
Katie and Booty Dedalus shoved in the door of the close, steaming kitchen. "Did you put in the books?" Booty asked. Maggie at the range rammed down a grayish mass beneath bubbling suds twice with her potstick and wiped her brow. "They wouldn't give anything on them," she said. Father Conmee walked through Clongowes fields, his thin-socked ankles tickled by stubble. "Where did you try?" Booty asked. "McGinnis's." Booty stamped her foot and threw her satchel on the table. "Bad cess to her big face," she cried. Katie went to the range and peered with squinting eyes. "What's in the pot?" she asked. "Shirts," Maggie said. Booty cried angrily, "Crikey, is there nothing for us to eat?" Katie, lifting the kettle lid in a pad of her stained skirt, asked, "And what's in this?" A heavy fume gushed in answer. "Pea soup," Maggie said. "Where'd you get it?" Katie asked. "Sister Mary Patrick," Maggie said. The lackey rang his bell. Brang! Booty sat down at the table and said hungrily, "Give us it here." Maggie poured yellow, thick soup from the kettle into a bowl. Katie, sitting opposite Booty, said quietly as her fingertip lifted to her mouth random crumbs, "A good job we have that much. Where's Dilly?" "Gone to meet father," Maggie said. Booty, breaking big chunks of bread into the yellow soup, added, "Our Father, who art not in heaven." Maggie, pouring yellow soup in Katie's bowl, exclaimed, "Booty, for shame." A skiff, a crumpled throwaway, Elijah is coming, rode lightly down the Liffey under Loop Line Bridge, shooting the rapids where water chafed around the bridge piers, sailing eastward past hulls and anchor chains between the Custom House Old Dock and George's Quay. Next, please.
The blonde girl in Thornton's bedded the wicker basket with rustling fibre. Blazes Boylan handed her the bottle swathed in pink tissue paper and a small jar. "Put these in first, will you?" he said. "Yes, sir," the blonde girl said, "and the fruit on top." "That'll do, game ball," Blazes Boylan said. She bestowed fat pears neatly, head by tail, and among them ripe, shame-faced peaches. Blazes Boylan walked here and there in Newtown shoes about the fruit-smelling shop, lifting fruits, young, juicy, crinkled, and plump red tomatoes, sniffing smells. HELY'(S) piled before him, tall, white-hatted, past Tangier Lane, plodding towards their goal. He turned suddenly from a chip of strawberries, drew a gold watch from his fob, and held it at its chain's length. Can you send them by tram? Now? A dark-backed figure under Merchant's Arch scanned books on the hawker's car. Certainly, sir. Is it in the city? Oh, yes, Ulysses Boylan said. 10 minutes. The blonde girl handed him a docket and pencil. Will you write the address, sir? Ulysses Boylan at the counter wrote and pushed the docket to her. Send it at once, will you? He said. It's for an invalid. Yes, sir. I will, sir. Ulysses Boylan rattled merry money in his trousers pocket. Next, please.
What's the damage? He asked. The blonde girl's slim fingers reckoned the fruits. Ulysses Boylan looked into the cut of her blouse, a young poet. He took a red carnation from the tall step glass. This for me? He asked gallantly. The blonde girl glanced sideways at him, got up regardless, with his tie a bit crooked, blushing. Yes, sir, she said. Bending archly, she reckoned again fat pears and blushing peaches. Ulysses Boylan looked in her blouse with more favor, the stalk of the red flower between his smiling teeth. May I say a word to your telephone, missy? He asked roguishly. Next.
Amidano Artefoni said. He gazed over Stephen's shoulder at Goldsmith's knobby pole. 2 carfuls of tourists passed slowly, their women sitting forward, gripping the handrests, pale faces, men's arms frankly round their stunted forms. They looked from Trinity to the blind column porch of the Bank of Ireland, where the pigeons cooed. Ancio, is there somebody here who can read the Italian? Okay.
Anch'io ho avuto di queste idee. Almidano Artefano said, Quando ero giovane come lei, e poi mi sono convinto che il mondo ha una bestia, e peccato, e peccato, perché la sua voce sarebbe un cepete di rendita. Via. Invece, lei si sacrificio incruento. Katrina?
Stephen said, smiling, swaying his ash plant in slow swung from its midpoint lightly.
Speriamo. Yeah, good. Speriamo.
Speriamo, the round mustachioed face said pleasantly, Ma dia retta a me ci rifletta. By the stern stone hand of Grayton, bidding halt, an Enchicor tram unloaded straggling Highland soldiers of a band. Ci riflettere, Stephen said, glancing down the solid trouser leg. Ma sui serio Almidano Artefoni said. His heavy hand took Stephen's firmly. Human eyes. They gazed curiously an instant and turned quickly towards the Dalkey tram. Eccolo, Almidano Artefoni said in friendly haste. Venge a trovarmi e che pensi. Addio, caro. Arrivederla, maestro, Stephen said, raising his hat when his hand was free. E grazie. De che, Almidano Artefoni said. Scusi, tante bella cosa. Almidano Artefoni, holding up the baton of rolled music as a signal, trotted on stout trousers after the Dalkey tram. In vain he trotted, signaling in vain among the rout of Bernie Gillies smuggling implements of music through Trinity gates. Next, please.
Miss Dunn hid the Capel Street library copy of The Woman in White far back in her drawer and rolled a sheet of gaudy notepaper into her typewriter. Too much mystery business in this. Is he in love with that one, Marion? Change it and get another one by Mary Cecil Hay. The disc shot down the groove, wobbled a while, ceased, and ogled them. 6. His thumb clicked on the keyboard. 16th June 1904. 5 tall white-hatted sandwichmen between Monpenny Corner and the slab where Wolfe Tone's statue was not, eeled themselves, turning HELY''S and plodded back as they had come. Then she stared at the large poster of Marie Kendall, charming soubrette, and listlessly lolling, scribbled on the jotter 16s and capital S's. Mustard hair and dobby cheeks. She was not nice looking, is she? The way she is holding her bit of a skirt. Wonder, will that fellow be in the band tonight? If I could get that dressmaker to make a concertina skirt like Susie Nagel's, they'd kick out grand. Shannon and all the boat club swells never took his eyes off of her. Hope to goodness he won't keep me here till 7. The telephone rang rudely by her ear. Hello? Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, sir. I'll ring them up after 5. Only those 2, sir, for Belfast and Liverpool. All right, sir. Then I can go after 6 if you're not back. A quarter later. Yes, sir. 27 and 6. I'll tell him. Yes, 176. She scribbled 3 figures on an envelope. Mr. Boylan, hello. The gentleman from Sport was in looking for you. Mr. Linehan, yes. He said he'll be in the Ormond at 4. No, sir. Yes, sir. I'll ring them up after 5. Next.
2 pink faces turned in the flare of the tiny torch. Who's that? Ned Lambert asked. Is that Crotty? Ringabella and Crosshaven, a voice replied, groping for foothold. Hello, Jack, is that yourself? Ned Lambert said, rising in salute, his pliant lath among the flickering arches. Come on, mind your steps there. The vesta in the clergyman's uplifted hand consumed itself in a long, soft flame and was let fall. At their feet, its red speck died, and mouldy air closed around them. How interesting, a refined accent said in the gloom. Yes, sir, Ned Lambert said heartily. We are standing in the historic council chamber of St. Mary's Abbey, where Silken Thomas proclaimed himself a rebel in 1534. This is the most historic spot in old Dublin. Martin Burke is going to write something about it one of these days. The old Bank of Ireland was over the way until the time of the Union, and the original Jews' temple was here too, before they built their synagogue over in Adelaide Road. You were never here before, Jack, were you? No, Ned. He rode down through Dame Walk, the refined accent said, if my memory serves me. The mansion of the Kildares was in Thomas Court. That's right, Ned Lambert said. That's quite right, sir. If you will be so kind, then, the clergyman said, the next time to allow me, perhaps. Certainly, Ned Lambert said. Bring the camera whenever you like. I'll get those bags cleared away from the windows. You can take it from here or from here. In the still faint light, he moved about, tapping with his lath the piled seed bags and points of vantage on the floor. From a long face, a beard and gaze hung on a chessboard. I am deeply obliged, Mr. Lambert, the clergyman said. I won't trespass on your valuable time. You're welcome, sir, Ned Lambert said. Drop in whenever you like. Next week, say. Can you see? Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Lambert. Very pleased to have met you. Pleasure is mine, sir, Ned Lambert answered. Next, please.
Followed his guest to the outlet, and then whirled his lathe away among the pillars. With J.J. O'Malloy, he came forth slowly into Mary's Abbey, where draymen were loading floats with sacks of carob and palm nut meal, O'Connor, Wexford. He stood to read the card in his hand. The Reverend Hugh C. Love Rathcoffey, President Address, St. Michael's Salons. Nice young chap he is. He's writing a book about the Fitzgeralds, he told me. He's well up in history, Faith. The young woman with slow care detached from her light skirt a clinging twig. I thought you were at A new gunpowder plot, J.J. O'Malloy said. Ned Lambert cracked his fingers in the air. God, he cried, I forgot to tell them the one about the Earl of Kildare after he set fire to Cashel Cathedral. You know that one. I'm bloody sorry I did it, says he, but I declare to God I thought the Archbishop was inside. He mightn't like it, though. What? God, I'll tell him anyhow. That was the great Earl, the Fitzgerald Moore. What members there were, all of them, the Geraldines. The horses he passed started nervously under their slack harness. He slapped a piebald haunch quivering near him and cried, Whoa, sonny. He turned to J.J. O'Malloy and asked, Well, Jack, what is it? What's the trouble? Wait a while. Hold hard. With gaping mouth and head far back, he stood still, and after an instant sneezed loudly. Chow, he said, blast you. The dust from those sacks, J.J. O'Malloy said politely. No, Ned Lambert gasped. I caught a cold night before. Blast your soul. Night before last, and there was a hell of a lot of draft. He held his handkerchief ready for the coming. I was, this morning, poor little, what do you call him? Chow, mother of Moses. Next.
Tom Rochford took the top disc from the pile he clasped against the claret waistcoat. See, he said, say it's turn 6. In here, see. Turn now on. He slid it into the left slot for them. It shot down the groove, wobbled a while, ceased, ogling them. 6. Lawyers of the past, haughty, pleading, beheld pass from the unconsolidated taxing office to Neasy Prius Court, Richie Goulding, carrying the cost bag of Goulding, Collis, and Ward, and heard rustling from the Admiralty Division of King's Bench to the Court of Appeal, an elderly female with false teeth, smiling incredulously in a black silk skirt of great amplitude. See, he said, see now the last one I put in on over here, turns over. The impact, leverage, see? He showed them the rising column of discs on the right. Smart idea, Nosy Flynn said, snuffling. So a fella coming in late can see what turn is on and what turns are over. See, Tom Rochford said. He slid in a disc for himself and watched it shoot, wobble, ogle, stop. 4. Turn now on. I'll see him now on the Ormond, Lenan said, and sound him. What good turn deserves another? Do, Tom Rochford said. Tell him I'm boiling with impatience. Good night, McCoy said abruptly. When you two begin, Nosy Flynn stooped towards the lever, snuffling at it. But how does it work here, Tommy, he asked. Tooraloo, Lenehan said. See you later. He followed McCoy out across the tiny square of Crampton Court. He's a hero, he said simply. I know, McCoy said. The drain, you mean? Drain, Lenehan said. It was down a manhole. They passed Don Lowry's music hall where Marie Kendall, charming soubrette, smiled on them from a poster, a dauby smile. Going down the path of Sycamore Street beside the Empire Music Hall, Lenehan showed McCoy how the whole thing was. One of those manholes, like a bloody gas pipe, and there was the poor devil stuck down in it, half choked with sewer gas. Down went Tom Rochford anyhow, bookie's vest and all, with the rope round him. And be damned, but he got the rope round the poor devil, and the two were hauled up. The act of a hero, he said. At the Dolphin, they halted to allow the ambulance car to gallop past them for Jervis Street. This way, he said, walking to the right. I want to pop into Lynham's to see Scepter's starting price. What's the time by your gold watch and chain? McCoy peered into Marcus Tertius Moses' somber office, then at O'Neill's clock. After 3, he said. Who's riding her? Oh, Madden, Lenehan said. And a game filly she is. Next, please.
While he waited in Temple Bar, McCoy dodged a banana peel with gentle pushes of his toe from the path to the gutter. Fella might damn easy get a nasty fall. They are coming along tight in the dark. The gates of the drive opened wide to give egress to the vice-regal cavalcade. Even money, Lenehan said, returning. I knocked against bantam lions and they're going to back a bloody horse someone gave him that hasn't an earthly. Through here. They went up the steps and under Merchant's Arch. A dark-backed figure scanned books on a hawker's cart. There he is, Lenehan said. Wonder what he's buying, McCoy said, glancing behind. Leopoldo or the bloom is on the rye, Lenehan said. He's dead nuts on sales, McCoy said. I was with him one day, and he bought a book from an old one in Liffey Street for $2. There were fine plates in it worth double the money, the stars and the moon, and comets with long tails. Astronomy it was about. Lenehan laughed. I'll tell you a damn good one about comets' tails, he said. Come over in the sun. They crossed to the metal bridge and went along Wellington Quay by the river wall. Master Patrick Aloysius Digdon came out of Mangan's, late Fehrenbach's, carrying 1.5 pounds of pork steaks. There was a long spread out at Glentree Reformatory, Lenehan said eagerly. The annual dinner, you know, foiled shirt affair. The Lord Mayor was there, Val Dillon was, and Sir Charles Cameron and Dan Dawson spoke, and there was music. Bartell Darcy sang, and Benjamin Dull. I know, McCoy broke in. My missus sang there once. Did she? Lenehan said. A card, unfurnished apartments, reappeared on the window sash of number 7 Echo Street. He checked his tail a moment, but broke out in a wheezy laugh. But wait till I tell you, he said. Delahunt of Camden Street had the catering, and yours truly was chief bottle washer. Bloom and the wife were there. Lashings of stuff we put up, port wine and sherry and curacao, to which we did ample justice. Fast and furious it was. After liquids came solids, cold joints galore, and mince pies. I know, McCoy said. The year the missus was there, Lenehan linked his arm warmly. Next.
But wait till I tell you, he said. We had a midnight lunch too, after all the jollification. And when we sallied forth, it was blue o'clock in the morning after the night before. Coming home, it was a gorgeous winter's night on the Featherbed Mountain. Bloom and Chris Callanan were on one side of the car, and I was with the wife on the other. We started singing glees and duets, though the early beam of morning. She was well primed with a good load of Delahunt sport under her belly band. Every jolt the bloody car gave, I had her bumping up against me. Hell's delights. She had a fine pair, God bless her, like that. He held his caved hands a cubit from him, frowning. I was tucking the rug under her and settling her boa all the time. Know what I mean? His hands molded the ample curves of air. He shut his eyes tight in delight, his body shrinking, and blew a sweet chirp from his lips. The lad stood to attention anyhow, he said with a sigh. She's a gamey mare and no mistake. Bloom was pointing out all the stars and the comets in the heavens to Chris Callanan and the Jarvey, the Great Bear and Hercules and the Dragon and the whole jing-bang lot. But by God, I was lost, so to speak, in the Milky Way. He knows them all, Faith. At last she spotted a weeny wishy 1 mile away. And what star is that, Polly? Says she. By God, she had Bloom cornered. That one is it, said Chris Callanan. Sure, that's only what you might call a pinprick. By God, he wasn't far wide of the mark. Lenehan stopped and leaned on the river wall, panting with soft laughter. I'm weak, he gasped. Next, please.
McCoy's white face smiled about it an instant and grew grave. Lenehan walked on again. He lifted his yachting cap and scratched his hind head rapidly. He glanced sideways in the sunlight at McCoy. He's a cultured all about man, Bloom is, he said seriously. He's not one of your commoner garden. You know, there's a touch of the artist in old Bloom. Mr. Bloom turned over idly pages of the Artful Disclosures of Maria Monk, then of Aristotle's masterpiece. Crooked botch print, plates infants cuddled in a ball in blood-red wounds like livers of slaughtered cows. Lots of them like that at the moment all over the world, all butting with their skulls to get out of it. Child born every minute somewhere. Mrs. Purefoy. He laid both books aside and glanced at the third. Tales of the Ghetto by Leopold von Sacher-Masoch. That I had, he said, pushing it by. The shopman let 2 volumes fall on the counter. Them's are 2 good ones, he said. Onions of his breath came across the counter out of his ruined mouth. He bent to make a bundle of the other books, hugged them against his unbuttoned waistcoat, and bore them off behind the dingy curtain. On O'Connell Bridge, many persons observed the grave deportment and gay apparel of Mr. Dennis J. McGinney, professor of dancing, and etc. Mr. Bloom alone looked at the titles. Fair Tyrants by John Love Birch. Know the kind that is. Had it? Yeah. He opened it. Thought so. A woman's voice behind the dingy curtain. Listen, the man. No, she wouldn't like that much. Got her at once. He read the other title. Sweets of Sin. Ah, more in her line. Let me see. He read where his finger opened. All the dollar bills her husband gave her were spent in the stores and wondrous gowns and costliest frillies for him, for Raoul. Yes, this. Here, try. Next.
Her mouth glued on his in a luscious, voluptuous kiss while his hands felt for the opulent curves inside her déshabillé. Yes, take this, the end. You are late, he spoke hoarsely, eyeing her with a suspicious glare. The beautiful woman threw off her sable-trimmed wrap, displaying her queenly shoulders and heaving embonpoint. An imperceptible smile played around her perfect lips as she turned to him calmly. Mr. Bloom read again. The beautiful woman. Warmth showered gently over him, cowing his flesh. Flesh yielded amid rumpled clothes. Whites of eyes swooning up. His nostrils arched themselves for prey. Melting breast ointments. For him! For Raoul! Armpits oniony sweat. Fish gluey slime. Her heaving embonpoint. Feel, press, crushed, sulphur dung of lions. Young, young. An elderly female, no more young, left the building of the Courts of Chancery, King's Bench, Exchequer and Common Pleas, having heard in the Lord Chancellor's Court the case in lunacy of Potterton, in the Admiralty Division, the summons ex parte motion of the owners of the Lady Cairns versus the owners of the bark Mona. In the Court of Appeal, reservation of judgment in the case of Harvey versus the Ocean Accident and Guarantee Corporation. Phlegmy coughs shook the air of the bookshop, bulging out the dingy curtains. The shopman's uncombed grey head came out, and his unshaven, reddened face, coughing. He raked his throat rudely, spat phlegm on the floor. He put his boot on what he had spat, wiping his sole along with it, and bent, showing a raw-skinned crown, scantily haired. Mr. Bloom beheld it. Mastering his troubled breath, he said, I'll take this one. The shopman lifted eyes, bleared with old rheum. Sweets of Sin, he said, tapping on it. That's a good one. Next.
Lackey by the door of Dillon's auction rooms shook his handbell twice again and viewed himself in the choked mirror of the cabinet. Billy Dedalus, listening by the curbstone, heard the beats of the bell, the cries of the auctioneer within. 4 and 9, those lovely curtains. 5 shillings, cosy curtains. Selling new at 2 guineas. Any advance on 5 shillings, going for 5 shillings. The lackey lifted his handbell and shook it. Barang. Bang of the last lap bell spurred the half-mile wheelmen to their sprint. J.A. Jackson, W.E. Wiley, A. Monroe, and H.T. Gahan, their stretched necks wagging, negotiated the curve by the college library. Mr. Dedalus, tugging a long moustache, came round from William's Row. He halted near his daughter. "It's time for you," she said. "Stand up straight for the love of the Lord Jesus," Mr. Dedalus said. "Are you trying to imitate your Uncle John the cornet player, head upon shoulders, melancholy God?" Dilly shrugged her shoulders. Mr. Dedalus placed his hands on them and held them back. "Stand up straight, girl," he said. "You'll get curvature of the spine. Do you know what you look like?" Let his head sink suddenly down and forward, hunching his shoulders and dropping his underjaw. "Give it up, Father," Dilly said. "All the people are looking at you." Mr. Dedalus drew himself upright and tugged again at his moustache. "Did you get any money?" Dilly asked. "Where would I get money?" Mr. Dedalus said. "There is no one in Dublin would lend me fourpence." "You got some," Dilly said, looking in his eyes. "How do you know that?" Mr. Dedalus asked, his tongue in his cheek. Mr. Kern, pleased with the order he had booked, walked boldly along James's Street. "I know you did," Dilly answered. "Were you in the Scotch House now?" "I was not then," Mr. Dedalus said, smiling. "Was it the little nuns taught you to be so saucy? Here," he handed her a shilling. "See if you can do anything with that," he said. "I suppose you got 5, Dilly said. "Give me more than that." "Wait a while," Mr. Dedalus said threateningly. "You're like the rest of them, are you? An insolent pack of little bitches since your poor mother died. But wait a while. You'll all get short shrift and a long day from me. Low blackguardism. I'm going to get rid of you. Wouldn't care if I was stretched out stiff. He's dead. The man upstairs is dead." He left her and walked on. Billy followed quickly and pulled his coat. "Well, what is it?" he said, stopping. Lackey rang his bell behind their backs. Barang. "Curse your bloody blatant soul," Mr. Dedalus cried, turning on him. Lackey, aware of comment, shook the lolling clapper of his bell but feebly. Bang. Mr. Dedalus stared at him. "Watch him," he said. "It's instructive. I wonder will he allow us to talk?" "You've got more than that, Father," Dilly said. "I'm going to show you a little trick," Mr. Dedalus said. "I'll leave you all where Jesus left the Jews. Look, that's all I have. I got 2 shillings from Jack Power, and I spent 2 pence for a shave for the funeral. Next, please."
He drew forth a handful of copper coins nervously. "Can't you look for some money somewhere?" Dilly said. Mr. Dedalus thought and nodded. "I will," he said gravely. "I looked all along the gutter in O'Connell Street. I'll try this one now." "You're very funny," Dilly said, grinning. "Here," Mr. Dedalus said, handing her 2 pennies. "Get a glass of milk for yourself and a bun or something. I'll be home shortly." He put the other coins in his pocket and started to walk on. The viceregal cavalcade passed, greeted by obsequious policemen out of Parkgate. "I'm sure you have another shilling," Dilly said. The lackey banged loudly. Mr. Dedalus, amid the din, walked off, murmuring to himself with a pursing, mincing mouth. "The little nuns, nice little things. Oh, sure, they wouldn't do anything. Oh, sure, they wouldn't really. Is it little Sister Monica?" From the sundial towards James's Gate walked Mr. Kernan, pleased with the order he had booked for Pulbrook Robertson, boldly along James Street, past Shackleton's offices. Got round him all right. "How do you do, Mr. Crimmins?" "First rate, sir. I was afraid you might be up in your other establishment in Pimlico. How are things going?" "Just keeping alive. Lovely weather we're having." "Yes, indeed. Good for the country. Those farmers are always grumbling." "I'll just take a thimbleful of your best gin, Mr. Crimmins." "A small gin, sir. Yes, sir." Terrible affair, that General Slocum explosion. Terrible, terrible. 1,000 casualties and heart-rending scenes Men trampling down women and children, most brutal thing. What do they say was the cause? Spontaneous combustion, most scandalous revelation. Not a single lifeboat would float, and the fire hose all burst. What I can't understand is how the inspectors ever allowed a boat like that. Now you're talking straight, Mr. Crimmins. You know why? Palm oil. Is that a fact? Without a doubt. Well, now look at that. And America, they say, is the land of the free. I thought we were bad here. I smiled at him. America, I said quietly, just like that. What is it? The sweepings of every country, including our own. Isn't that true? That's a fact. Graft, my dear sir. Well, of course, where there's money going, there's always someone to pick it up. Saw him looking at my frock coat. Dress does it. Nothing like a dressy appearance. Bowls them over. Hello, Simon, Father Cowley said. How are things? Hello, Bob, old man, Mr. Dedalus answered, stopping. Mr. Kernan halted and preened himself before the sloping mirror of Peter Kennedy, hairdresser. Stylish coat beyond a doubt. Scott of Dawson Street. Well worth the half-sovereign I gave Neary for it. Never built under 3 guineas. Fits me down to the ground. Some Kildare Street club toff had it, probably. John Mulligan, the manager of the Hibernian Bank, gave me a very sharp eye yesterday on Carlisle Bridge, as if he remembered me. Ahem. Must dress to character for those fellows, Knight of the Road, gentlemen. And now, Mr. Crimmins, may we have the honor of your custom again, sir? The cup that cheers but not inebriates, as the old saying has it. North Wall and Sir John Rogerson's Quay, with hulls and anchor chains sailing westward, sailed by a skiff, a crumpled throwaway, rocked on the ferry wash. Elijah is coming. Next, please.
Mr. Kernan glanced in farewell at his image. High color, of course. Grizzled mustache. Returned Indian officer. Bravely he bore his stumpy body forward on spatted feet, squaring his shoulders. Is that Lambert's brother over the way, Sam? What? Yes, he's as like it as, damn it. No, the windscreen of that motor car in the sun there. Just a flash like that. Damn like him. Ahem. Hot spirit of juniper juice warmed his vitals and his breath. Good drop of gin that was. His frock tails winked in bright sunshine to his fat strut. Down there, Emmet was hanged, drawn and quartered. Greasy black rope. Dogs licking the blood off the street where the Lord Lieutenant's wife drove by in her noddy. Let me see. Is he buried in St. Mickens? Or no, there was a midnight burial in Glasnevin. Corpse brought in through a secret door in the wall. Dignam is there now. Went out in a puff. Well, well, better turn down here, make a detour. Mr. Kernan turned and walked down the slope of Watling Street by the corner of Guinness's visitors' waiting room. Outside the Dublin Distillers Company stores, an outside car without fare or jarvey stood. The reins knotted to the wheel. Damn dangerous thing. Some Tipperary bosthoon endangering the lives of the citizens. Runaway horse. Next, please.
Lois, you need to unmute.
Oh, Dean Dennis Breen with his tones, weary of having waited an hour in John Henry Menton's office, led his wife over O'Connell Bridge, bound for the office of Messrs. Collis and Ward. Mr. Kernan approached Island Street. Times of the troubles. Must ask Ned Lambert to lend me those reminiscences of John Barrington, Sir Jonah Barrington. When you look back on it all now in a kind of retrospective arrangement. Gaming at Daly's, no card shopping then. One of those fellows got his hand nailed to the table by a dagger. Somewhere here, Lord Edward Fitzgerald escaped from Major Sir Stables behind Moira House. Damn good gin that was. Fine, dashing young nobleman. Good stock, of course. That ruffian, that sham squire, with his violet gloves gave him away. Of course, they were on the wrong side. They rose in dark and evil days. Fine poem, that is, Ingram. They were gentlemen. Ben Dollar does sing that ballad touchingly. Masterly rendition. At the siege of Ross did my father fall. The cavalcade in easy trot along Pembroke Quay past outriders leaping in their saddles, frock coats, cream sunshades. Mr. Curtin hurried forward, blowing pursily. His Excellency, too bad. Just missed that by a hair. Damn it, what a pity. Next.
Stephen Dedalus watched through the webbed window. The lapidary's fingers prove a time-dulled chain. Dust webbed the windows and the show trays. Dust darkened the toiling fingers with their vulture nails. Dust slept on dull coils of bronze and silver, lozenges of cinnabar on rubies, leprous and wine-dark stones. Born all in the dark, wormy earth, cold specks of fire, evil lights shining in the darkness, where fallen archangels flung the star of their brows. Muddy swine stouts, hands, root and root, gripe and rest them. She dances in a foul gloom where gum burns with garlic. A sailor man, rust-bearded, sips from a beaker rum and eyes her, a long and sea-fed silent rut. She dances, capers, wagging her sowish haunches and her hips, on her gross belly flapping a ruby egg. Old Russell, with a smeared chamois rag burnished against his gem, turned it and held it at the point of his Moses' beard. Grandfather Ape gloating on a stolen hoard. And you who wrest old images from the burial earth, the brain-sick words of sophists, Antisthenes, a lore of drugs, orient and immortal wheat standing from everlasting to everlasting. Two old women, fresh from their whiff on the briny, trudged through Irish town along London Bridge Road, one with a sanded tired umbrella, one with a midwife's bag in which 11 cockles rolled. The whir of flapping leathern bands and hum of dynamis from the powerhouse urged Stephen to be on. Beingless beings, stop. Throb always with you and the throb always within. Your heart you sing of. I between them. Where? Between two roaring worlds where they swirl. I shatter them, one and both. But stun myself too in the blow. Shatter me, you who can. Bod and butcher were the words I say. Not yet a while, a look around. Yes, quite true, very large and wonderful, and keeps famous time. You say right, sir. A Monday morning, 'twas so indeed. Next, please.
Stephen went down Bedford Row, the handle of the ash clacking against his shoulder blade. In Clohissey's window, a faded 1860 print of Heenan boxing sayer held his eye. Staring backers with square hats stood round the roped prize ring. The heavyweights in light loincloth proposed gently each to other his bulbous fist. They are throbbing heroes' hearts. He turned and halted by the slanted book cart. 2 pence each, the huckster said, 4 for 6 pence. Tattered pages. The Irish Beekeeper, Life and Miracles of the Cures of R, Pocket Guide to Killarney. I might find here one of my pond school prizes. Stephen Dedalus, Alumno Optimo, Palman Ferenti. Next, please.
Father Conmee, having read his little hours, walked through the hamlet of Donnycarney, murmuring vespers. Binding too good, probably. What is this? Eighth and ninth book of Moses. Secret of all secrets. Seal of King David. Thumbed pages. Read and read. Who has passed here before me? How to soften chapped hands. Recipe for white wine vinegar. How to win a woman's love. For me, this. Say the following talisman 3 times with hands folded. Say el hilo nebracada feminium amor me solo sanctus. Amen. Who wrote this? Charms and invocations of the most blessed Abbot Peter Salanka to all true believers divulged, as good as any other abbot's charms, as mumbling Joachim's, down baldy noddle, or will wool your wool. Next.
What are you doing here, Stephen? Dilly's high shoulders and shabby dress. Shut the book quick. Don't let's see. What are you doing? Stephen said. A steward face of none-such Charles, lank locks falling at its sides. It glowed as she crouched feeding the fire with broken boots. I told her of Paris, late lie abed under a quilt of old overcoats, fingering a pinchbeck bracelet, Dan Kelly's token, Nebracada Femininum. What have you there? Stephen asked. I bought it from the other cart for a penny, Dilly said, laughing nervously. Is it any good? My eyes, they say she has. Do others see me so? Quick, far and daring, shadow of my mind. He took the coverless book from her hand, Chardin's French primer. What did you buy that for? He asked. To learn French? She nodded, reddening and closing tight her lips. Show no surprise, quite natural. Here, Stephen said, it's all right. Mine Maggie doesn't pawn it. I suppose all my books are gone. Some, Dilly said, we had to. She is drowning. Agenbite, save her. Agenbite. All against us. She will drown me with her eyes and hair. Lank coils of seaweed hair around me. My heart, my soul, salt green death. We. Agenbite of Inwit. Inwit's Agenbite. Misery. Misery. Next, please.
Bill, you're gonna have to unmute.
Hello, Simon, Father Cowley said. How are things? Hello, Bob, old man, Mr. Littlest answered, stopping. They clasped hands loudly outside Reddy and daughters. Father Cowley brushed his mustache off and downward with a scooping hand. What's the best news? Mr. Dedalus said. Why, then, not much, Father Cowley said. I'm barricaded up, Simon, with 2 men prowling around the house trying to effect an entrance. Jolly, Mr. Dedalus said. Who is it? Oh, Father Cowley said, a certain Gombeen man of our acquaintance. With a broken back, is it? Mr. Dedalus asked. The same, Simon, Father Cowley answered. Reuben of that ilk. I'm just waiting for Ben Dollard. He's going to say a word to Long John to get him to take those 2 men off. All I want is a little time. He looked with vague hope up and down the quay, a big apple bulging in his neck. I know, Mr. Dedalus said, nodding. Poor old Bockety Ben. He's always doing a good turn for someone. Hold hard. He put on his glasses and gazed toward the metal bridge an instant. There he is, by God, he said. Arse and pockets. Ben Dollard's loose blue cutaway and square hat above large slops crossed the quay in full gait from the metal bridge. He came towards them at an amble, scratching actively behind his coattails. As he came near, Mr. Dedalus greeted. Hold that fellow with the bad trousers. Hold him now, Ben Dollard said. Mr. Dedalus eyed with cold, wandering scorn various points of Ben Dollard's figure. Then, turning to Father Cowley with a nod, he muttered sneeringly, That's a pretty garment, isn't it, for a summer's day? Why, God eternally curse your soul, Ben Dollard growled furiously. I threw out more clothes in my time than you ever saw. He stood beside them, beaming on them first, and then on his roomy clothes, from points of which Mr. Dedalus licked fluff, saying, They were made for a man in his health, Ben, anyhow. Bad luck to the Jewman that made them, Ben Dollard said. Thanks be to God he's not paid yet. And how is that, basso profundo, Benjamin? Father Cowley asked. Cashel Boyle O'Connor Fitzmaurice Tisdall Farrell, murmuring, glassy-eyed, strode past the Kildare Street Club. Ben Dollard frowned, and making suddenly a chanter's mouth, gave forth a deep note. "Oh," he said. "That's the style," Mr. Dedalus said, nodding to its drone. "What about that?" Ben Dollard said. "Not too dusty, what?" He turned to both. "That'll do," Father Cowley said, nodding also. The Reverend U.C. Loved walked from the old chapter house of St. Mary's Abbey past James and Charles Kennedy's rectifiers, attended by Geraldine's tall and personable, towards the fossil beyond the ford of hurdles. Ben Dollard, with a heavy list towards the shop fronts, led them forward, his joyful fingers in the air. "Come along with me to the sub-sheriff's office," he said. "I want to show you the new beauty Rock has for a bailiff. He's a cross between Labengula and Lynch Nahon. He's well worth seeing, mind you. Come along. I saw John Henry Menton casually in the bodega just now, and it will cost me a fall if I don't. Wait a minute. We're on the right lay, Bob. Believe you me." "For a few days, tell him," Father Cowley said anxiously. Ben Dollard halted and stared, his loud orifice open, a dangling button of his coat wagging bright-backed from the thread as he wiped away the heavy shrawms that clogged his eyes. "To hear, all right." Next, please.
What
So
few
we'll-
days? Oh, are we finished now?
No, after you've read, go ahead and finish this section, Orla, and then we are finished. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
What few days, he boomed. Hasn't your landlord distrained for rent? He has, Father Carley said. Then our friend's writ is not worth the paper it's printed on, Ben Dollard said. The landlord has the prior claim. I gave him all the particulars. 29 Windsor Avenue. Love is the name. That's right, Father Carley said. The Reverend Mr. Love. He's a minister in the country somewhere. But are you sure of that? You can tell Barabbas from me, Ben Dollard said, that he can put that writ where Jacko put the nuts. He led Father Cowley boldly forward, linked to his bulk. Filberts, I believe there were, Mr. Dedalus said as he dropped his glasses on his coat front, following them.
All right. Good. So I have the pages where we stopped for Gabler and for Wordsworth. Other additions, please? Donna, where are you in yours?
245 in the Penguin.
245, okay. Lois, you have Gabler's and
Right.
Katrina, what are you reading? Can't hear you. Sorry. Your microphone's off.
Gabler.
Okay. Is that it? We have Penguin, Gabler, and Wordsworth today. You had Modern Library, is it, Bill?
Yeah, 242 in Modern Library.
Okay. Right. Good. Comments, questions, anything like that? I like Simon Dedalus is just a child. There was something that he said. Oh yeah, when Dilly asked him about more money, and he lies, and Joyce mentions he had his his thumb in his cheek.
Was it thumb or tongue?
Oh,
Tongue. He had his tongue in his cheek. Yes, which I think is the old, like
Yep.
crossing your fingers or something like that.
yeah.
That just came out very strongly that Simon he just never really grew up, even though he had.
Interesting to see the couple of themes that have been introduced, or we've already seen them, like that piece of paper that was crumpled and thrown into the Liffey, and it's wending its way down the Liffey, and there are a couple of references to that. And then there's also the reference to Gertie, who's fixing her skirt, and we'll get to her later. So these are sort of just thrown into the middle of it, by the way, but obviously it's quite purposeful what Joyce is doing.
It's interesting. One thing I had never noticed before was that the Daedalus family seems to be living very near to the Blooms on 7 Eccles Street, because we see the one-legged sailors about to go down Eccles Street past Molly's house, and it says he swung himself violently forward past Katie and Booty Daedalus, halted and growled, home and beauty. Now, it's possible that Katie and Booty are just out walking, but they'd have a hell of a walk to get home, which is right in the next episode. It says Katie and Booty Daedalus shoved in the door of the close steaming kitchen. So they're not very far away from 7 Eccles Street.
I think so. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I think at this stage they were living in St. Peter's Road in Phibsborough, which is only less than a quarter mile, I'd say, from Eccles Street. Less, around the corner, down the road kind of stuff.
So you would go down Dorset to where?
You would go down the north, the Cabra Road, North Circular Road, turn right into Berkeley Road, and then left into Eccles Street, and continues straight down into town. Sorry, it's my route into town. So, and it was also the house that I think he was least fond of, and it always seemed dark and gloomy. And I think it's where his mother did die. And it was just, they were on their uppers at that stage, which is telling, as you see Dilly trying to get money from the father in town.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes sense. I mean, a quarter of a mile is not that much of a hike to go from, for the two of them, especially two kids, Katie and Booty. But I hadn't noticed that they were right there on Eccles Street, maybe on Dorset and Eccles. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe they were going up Dorset to Circular Road, heading home. Where they were coming from is anybody's business, or anybody knows. We know where Dilly is, and but we know Katie and Booty head home, and then Maggie's washing clothes and got some food for them. But I hadn't really noticed that it was that close before to 7 Eccles Street.
I'm thinking more, even less, a quarter of mile less. It's really just a few blocks.
Gotcha.
So I'm very bad at judging distance.
That's all right. When I was in Dublin last year, I stayed on what's the next street? I'm not going to remember the street now, but it's right off of Dorset Street, just a little bit farther north, where the Jesuit church is that Father Conmee comes out of. Father Conmee comes out of the Jesuit church and then walks down
Gardner Street, maybe?
Upper Gardner Street, right.
That's so close as well, yeah.
Yeah. And it was great to be near all of those places, be able to really picture them where everybody is, where everybody's walking.
Yeah. I just love the sense of the slowness of it, and yet there's a tapestry being woven, throughout the centre of Dublin at the same time, but everything is observed, and it's observed in detail, from the tram, from just passing by, from little conversations, you know, so you get time to kind of feel,
Mhm.
you know, sense the place.
Well, and you get a sense too, if Joyce had been staying up on Phipsborough or at least visiting the family. I mean, obviously he saw his mother dying there and spent time there. He didn't miss anything. He walked down those streets. He walked down Dorset and down Eccles and noticed things. Knew the Mater Hospital and all of the pork butchers and the St. George's Church, and he heard the bells and he heard the whirring of the machinery and everything. It's brilliantly observed, as you say. He didn't miss a thing.
Hi, pussycat.
Her contribution is probably as useful as mine. So anyhow, I just love the Wandering Rocks episode. It just brings me back. I think it was for the centenary. A group of us, we did readings down in St. Mary's Abbey on the day. And I know it was recorded and there was a choir singing as well, but we did some of them, like we did the kind of dramatic excerpts from the scenes that were in St. Mary's Abbey. And it was the most wonderful time. It was really great. I think it never got published because of there were still what you call them, copyright difficulties with the Joyce Foundation at that stage. So I think it had to be suppressed, but actually we did it anyway.
This was in 2004.
That would have been it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a long time now, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that was probably my first ever public reading of any of Ulysses. So
Great.
not too shabby.
No, not shabby at all.
Yeah. I was interested when the girls were in the kitchen and the one girl was disappointed with the fact that shirts were being boiled. And then there's this comment where they make, "Our Father who is not in heaven," which is the first time in both the reading Joyce and in reading about Joyce that maybe his brother was also a renegade from the church also, but I was a little surprised to hear one of the girls being less than fully Catholic in that remark.
I think having grown up with that family, they probably got as much an education from older brothers and sisters as, you know, the education they got in the Catholic schools.
Right, but I always got the impression that the family was not happy, was never happy with Joyce and Nora living in sin, as it were.
Oh, well, that would have been total disgrace in those days. Gosh, it still was. Even, you know, my young days, you know, not married. It was just beyond the pale.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that if his younger brother and sisters would have cared a whit about it, but his older aunts and uncles would certainly have been scandalized. But his immediate family, I don't think would have cared one way or another.
Okay.
But I think you're coming from an American culture where God is, you have to sort of, sorry, I'm interpreting this from watching television, but everybody has to stick God into everything in a sort of a positive way. So I think she's confronted with yellow split pea soup, which is all they have to eat, and she's just giving out. Whereas that wouldn't be seen as, and then the sister goes for shame. But, you're not to say that, but that's just conversation.
But she's talking about her about her father, not about God. She's talking about our Father who art not in heaven, meaning Simon. she's, the kids know that their father's a wastrel and a ne'er-do-well and pretty much useless as far as providing for them is concerned. So
Right.
she's
Mhm.
she's being disrespectful of her father, not necessarily she's not blaspheming or anything.
Well, I was probably reading too much into it then, because I thought she was actually talking about both fathers at the same time, in the sense that, our Father in heaven, why would he impose this earthly father on us if he was actually up there rooting for us? So, it's probably just the blasphemer in me.
The scene with Dilly and Simon, I thought there was an interesting undercurrent of the auction going on in the background. She's asking for more money. He's giving her something. Down goes the hammer. Then she asks for some more. Maybe you'll find a little bit. Bang goes the hammer. I thought it was rather cinematic in the two scenes going on at the same time.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, she knows that when dealing with her father, Simon, you got to keep pressing to try to get everything you can out of him, that, just to try for one time, and that's what I said. Simon is so childish himself. I mean, it's almost like, not father and daughter. It's almost like two children, a big child and a smaller child. So
Do we think Dilly will ever learn French?
We certainement.
yeah, with the kind of stubbornness she shows when pressing her father,
Yep.
shows that she has stick-to-itiveness. Oh yeah. So can someone tell me about this thing where they're talking about the wolf tone statue was not?
Was there
I
a
think- I
statue
think-
removed?
I think there was a proposed statue of Wolf Tone, but there was just this place where it was supposed to be, but hadn't been built. I think that's what that refers to.
Okay.
I think the Wolf Tone statue eventually ended up in Bodenstown Cemetery. Is that correct?
I think so.
And the Fianna Fáil party have their annual gathering there to pay homage to Wolf Tone.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if the two references are the same, but it just seems a coincidence if they're not.
Yeah, they put the foundation stone down, but they never completed the statue. So everybody knew that was where the statue of Wolf Tone was supposed to be, but it was never there. Just a place where it was not.
Okay. I wonder in America and England where they're taking down statues of Confederate heroes, if the right wing will start referring to those places as the place where Robert E. Lee's statue is no longer.
We leave that to Cormac McCarthy, Duncan.
There you go. There you go. I also really like this thing with Father Comney when he's thinking about the Reverend T.R. Green. And it says, one should be charitable, invincible ignorance. Invincible ignorance, they acted according to their lights. Okay. And one more minor question, if you don't mind. Who is the spendthrift nobleman? It says near Aldborough House, Father Comney thought of that spendthrift nobleman. Now it was an office or something.
Oh, I should know. I can't think of it.
Yeah, that was Aldborough. See if I can find it.
It was when the city, the gentry was still very much north side rather than south side. And I think he just put everything into this huge mansion, which is, it's been let go to ruin. It has its own theatre, it had wings around it, and now it's just basically in the inner city, Dublin, isolated offices, falling down, horrible. But that was before everybody moved south side, so he was left kind of basically, he was the only guy north side. So it didn't.
Okay.
Was that in Henrietta Street, Emily?
He's way down, near the Five Lamps. It's kind of.
Oh, right, okay.
You go right down the North Circular Road for, I don't know how many stops, and I lose track of the number of street names at this stage. And as you're heading down towards, let's say if you're going for the ferry or something, you keep on going a bit, and it's down North Strand, nearly. Okay. I'm sorry I'm so vague, but it'll give you an idea.
No, actually, this is all wonderful between Donna and Orla and Bill and you, Emily. This is for us who do not know Dublin itself. This is quite a fascinating education and a whole other layer to the book, which
The house that that Aldborough house was one that Lord Aldborough had. They had houses all over the place. They had houses in Dublin already, and in London, and in the country. But he built this one up on the north side for his wife, and I think it was like £40,000 at the time. It was a beautiful mansion, but she refused to live in it because she didn't like the location. So it was like built for nothing. I mean, just like £40,000 wasted. And I guess, I suppose Joyce is intending us to contrast this with the penury that the Daedalus family is living in. The fact that they don't have a crust of bread and a little bowl of pea soup, Anyway.
And the pea soup was given to them by
charity.
Somebody or not.
Yeah, by the nuns. Yeah.
I have a question about the penury. Duncan, now that we're reading Portrait at the same time, we just did the Christmas scene, for instance, and they seemed quite prosperous.
Yeah,
what happened to the Daedalus family? Will we find out at the end of Portrait? I don't remember.
Simon is what happened to the Daedalus family. He just drank his money away. He sold off their properties piecemeal that they had in Cork and elsewhere, and lost one job after another, and was evicted from one house after another, and had to set up house again. And then when the wife died, that was the end of it. I mean, there was nothing else for Simon at that point. He just kind of gave up. He was just, he spent all. Go ahead.
Had been well off. He brought them not sort of from a regular income family, but from a well-off family.
Yeah. That's why I was questioning.
Yeah, quite a fall.
Yeah.
But
he was from.
I think Bill said earlier he was a wastrel, which is precisely what he was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, when did he begin wastrelling? That's what I'm trying to figure out. When Stephen is a little boy, 10 years old, everything seems okay.
Yeah.
By the time he's 20, it's okay. Terrible.
That's why he actually, Stephen originally went to a pretty
he went to a good school,
posh school, but then they had to demote him. His father, it's worth at least reading a simple biography of James Joyce's father. He was from a family from Cork, and they had property and connections. And, he not only had funds and property when he moved from Cork to Dublin, but he had a fairly good government job, which he screwed up. And among the things that he did, he went into business. He got into the whiskey business, I think it was.
Yeah, a distillery.
The distillery.
that didn't pan out. And I think there were some political implications too. I think his support of Parnell kept him back from, getting any other government positions,
Mhm.
perhaps. Before then, I think his connections helped, his support for Parnell helped his situation in terms of job, but then afterwards it became more of a liability, in addition to his own lack of stability, let's put it that way. His love of the liquor.
But I can just go back for a moment to what Bill was saying about Aldborough House. Just found something here that says it's a landmark Georgian building in Dublin, built as a private residence in 1795. The original structure included a chapel, since lost, and a theatre wing. The house was used for periods as a school, barracks, and post office depot before becoming vacant in the early 21st century. While vacant, the building was subject to vandalism and fire. It was listed by An Taisce, the National Trust for Ireland, as in poor condition, and included in its 2021 list of top 10 most at-risk buildings nationally.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep.
Or James Joyce as a writer of Bodice Rippers. Discuss.
Oh, you read it so beautifully. It was really,
I
was getting a little moist.
I was getting a bit carried away myself. But he's actually written this, Anyway.
I like the term palm oil that's mentioned.
You-
when they're talking-
You know,
when
I just figured out what that was in this reading. It's greasing a palm.
Greasing a palm, yeah, palm
You know,
oil.
this is the first time whoever was reading it this time, it made perfect sense to me. I'd never known that before.
Yeah, and I believe the General Slocum, they're talking about the General Slocum, the ferry boat or whatever it is that went
Mhm.
down. Terrible tragedy. It's mentioned in a number of places. And I believe that was over in New York, and there were, maybe Tammany Hall was involved. I don't know.
No, it was a German church group. And it was on the East River. And these were city people who, even if there had been life preservers, they didn't know how to swim. And it was 19 whatever, and the women had the big skirts, and the fire hoses didn't work. I learned more about it at the time of the September 11 attacks, because prior to the September 11 attacks, it was the greatest loss of life in one day in New York City. It was like
Right.
1,000 church people. And that was a German Protestant church might have been uptown, because Yorkville is the German neighborhood in those days. So it could be on the Upper East Side, but it was on the East River that this boat caught fire.
I think
Right.
it led to some reforms in terms of
Yes.
rules and regulations, but I think it's true that I don't know about Tammany Hall, but there was certainly that ferry should not have been allowed
Right.
to be operating, let alone. Well, anyway,
Yeah,
It was
right.
certainly corruption.
yeah.
Yeah, well, it's like that. They just had that earthquake in Turkey, 5 months ago or something, and of course it was a standard thing. All these buildings fell down, and they had been approved by the building inspectors, and it was a huge scandal. The standard thing, contractors were probably using more sand than cement in their concrete. And the building inspectors were letting it go. They probably also were not putting in sufficient metal, to support the concrete. And this is just a standard thing that happens, and seems to be seems to be a tradition coming back to the United States slowly but surely, where everybody's, the inspectors and all, everybody's trying to, make extra money. So, but it's certainly a nice little example, and it's kind of fun to watch James Joyce use it as an example of scandal and political corruption.
It's odd how every time there's a great deal of deregulation under one administration, there's always some tragedy as a result of it. And then the regulations have to be enforced again. So the regulations become put on the books, but then of course, if you have good government with good regulations, there's going to be graft and corruption. I mean, it's just inevitable. People will find a way to get around the rules and regulations. One party doesn't want to have any regulations, laissez-faire economics. The market will take care of itself. Well, if the buildings keep falling down, they won't hire those people. Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, people's lives are at risk.
Yeah, well, I'm a little on the cynical side, and I think that, reform happens after disaster.
Yeah.
And very rarely does reform ever happen before disaster.
Right.
And then, after things, as you're alluding to, Bill, that if there are regulations and they're working, everybody gets complacent about it. And then they want to, loosen it up either officially or unofficially.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we had the crash of 29, and then we had banking regulations in place. And they worked perfectly well for decades until people thought, hey, we could make a lot more money if we were allowed to. We didn't have these stupid regulations, and we could also sell mortgages and do all. And then of course we had the big housing bubble and then another bank crash, and it's a vicious cycle.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, shall we wrap it up for today, or does someone
Guess so.
have something? All right,
Yep.
Emily, thank you very much for joining us.
That was great.
And great to see you all again.
So, yeah.
Okay, guys. Thanks, Duncan.